Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello, and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. on a week-to-week basis, looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we go through the 21st century. And as we're looking around the globe and all the things that we need to be concerned about, one of those things, of course, is water. How we're going to be able to take care of the water we currently have and expand for another 2 billion people that will be joining the planet by 2050. And I have a gentleman sitting right beside me who's spent much of his lifetime thinking about it, but actually being on it, in it, and taking care of water. This is James. He goes by Jim R. Foster, President, CEO of what's called the Anacostia Watershed Society. And Jim, welcome back to the Emerald Planet.
Sam, thanks. It's great to be here with you.
Glad to have you with you. And you guys are doing absolutely fantastic work. You must have at least 1,000 paid staff out there to do all the things that we see going on about you all the time.
You know, I wish that were the case. There's 20 of us, Sam.
Oh, don't blow the image. Don't blow the image. But anyway, mission and vision of the Anacostia Watershed Society. What is it?
So our mission is to help restore the Anacostia River to fishable and swimmable by 2025. And that's really very basic articulation from the Clean Water Act of 1972, where we're just hoping to get back to where we should be and where we should have been in 40 years ago.
Now, this is something, you invited me out for this event. I really enjoyed being there, but the State of the Anacostia River report card. I really didn't know rivers had report cards. You know, I remember mine from school days. But why an annual evaluation of a river? What's really happening in all this and the purpose of this report card?
Sure. So, you can't fix what you don't measure. And with that, we look at several criteria, basic water quality issues, dissolved oxygen. We all needed oxygen, including the fish, nutrients and sediment loads in the river and things of that nature. And we try to help use that as a tool. It's a communications tool to help us, shall we say, persuade others to do the right thing.
Yeah, looking at this, we've got an overall grade. I won't even mention that. But the thing is, this was great celebration. And so tell us what this river report really means, because we see this curve is going in the right direction. Right.
Our criteria are all trending in a great direction. This takes time. You don't just throw the switch and it's all done. We've been working on this for almost 30 years, and the things that we've put into place are just coming to fruition. So as the water cleans up, we're seeing more submerged aquatic vegetation, just as a very basic issue with clean water. You need that submerged aquatic vegetation to help clean the water, and we had a real bonus year last year with submerged aquatic vegetation.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, this is part of the Clean Rivers project, and this is something that you really have a huge neighbor that you're collaborating with. And so tell us who this neighbor is, and then what is it that they're doing right now that is actually going to really trend these statistics and these studies upward over the next 5, 10, or 15 years.
So our local little municipal wastewater system called DC Water has for years operated a combined sewer system in Washington, D.C. proper. And that means we have one pipe that carries the sewage, and then on a rainy day it also carries the stormwater. And so we have a system that can't handle that volume when it rains a lot, and they have to overflow it into the river. So we have been discharging combined sewage overflow into the Anacostia for 140 years. Now, this is very common across the U.S. It was state of the art when it was built in 1870, and today we're making amends for that. And DC Water has become a great partner. They are building a system of tunnels that will act as cisterns to store that overflow instead of it being released into the water. It will be treated then at their big advanced wastewater treatment plant at Blue Plains.
Yeah, and this really is, and I've been in 93 countries, and I've been in a lot of wastewater treatment facilities. And this really is the most advanced in the world that I've even seen. And actually, they say they're not the largest, but I've been in China, India, South Africa, Brazil. This really is the largest I've ever seen. But it's very complex, and at the same time, you have a tremendous amount of people that are investing $2.7 billion to do this tunnel system. And they really started with the Anacostia River. Why start with the Anacostia?
Great question. So if you scratch the surface a little bit, they are required to reduce those combined sewer overflows by 98%. That's a huge, huge requirement. Why, you ask? Great question. Because the river doesn't have enough flow in it to actually attenuate any additional waste coming in the river. So basically, for all intents and purposes, they have to remove 100% of the discharge.
And this is what you were talking about earlier as far as this growth in the water itself. And this is something that really you can see now for the first time and maybe hundreds of years, because this all started back when the colonists came, 1607. Down at Jamestown. They came up the Anacostia, went back down, and it was kind of downhill ever since. But tell us what we're looking at right here. What is this? This looks like a leaf on a, the branch on a pine tree.
It is. Sam, we've never understood how, or we've forgotten, let's say, how critical plant life is to very basic biology. So we want to have trees, we want to have plants, we want to have wetland plants that provide that surface area where the oxygen can be exchanged into the water. Those plants take the nutrients out, they provide a habitat for the small fish, and it's just really critical that we have more of that. So where we have channelized the river with walls and excavated it out, there are no, when Europeans first came here, there were 2,500 acres of tidal wetland. Today there's 130. So you can just
what's the comparison?
2,500
at one time when they came?
130 today.
Oh my God, that's just incredible.
Right, wetlands, as you may know, are the kidneys of the river. They really help clean it. And Sam, the lesson here is this is going on everywhere in the world. And we just need to let everybody know from sea to shining sea. This is really critical.
Yep, and that's why we have EmeraldPlanet TV, so we can get the message out there. But looking at this aquatic life and the vegetation on top of the water, what is this showing us now as far as where the Anacostia has been, but now where it's going?
So this particular picture that you're looking at is submerged aquatic vegetation in the Anacostia, directly across from Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, where it has taken root, literally, in a patch of water near Buzzard Point that has seen improvements in water quality enough to allow these plants to start growing in there. And it takes some level of water clarity to allow the sunlight to get down to the bottom so that the plants can get started. And so that's why water clarity is one of our criteria as well.
And now looking at this is probably not much water clarity as far as what we're seeing right now.
We have had record water clarity in the last couple of years, but we've had a lot of rain in the last 8 weeks, and so our water clarity is not as good as it has been.
And then when you have something like this really is going to keep the sunshine and the plants from actually growing if you have all this trash and litter going into the river. And I know this is something that you work on year in, year out. I've been part of these volunteer teams going out and retrieving all this trash. But what is this actually doing to the water itself and then the aquatic life in that, both plants and the fish?
The Clean Water Act requires people to look at what is impairing the water quality. And we are one of 3 rivers in the country that is impaired by trash. Very critical to understand. It's a tool to help focus the efforts towards reducing that trash. We consider trash to be a psychological toxin, as we've talked about before. That people don't want to come and sit and have a picnic when there's a lot of trash around.
Right.
What we're seeing is this trash, in particular the plastic bags, the styrofoam, the beverage containers, they get completely smashed up, tumbled up, and become smaller and smaller pieces. We're worried about microplastics now in the water. This is one of the main sources of it, is all this plastic. All this eventually will end up in the ocean. We all live downstream.
Now, looking at this, as far as these waterways, what aren't we seeing here that actually is happening to Anacostia, which is to the positive as far as what's going on? Now, let me back up through this. I was going through this, but tell us a little bit about, we're going from this, now we're going to here. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing and why is this area so important to the Anacostia, but not just the Anacostia, Jim, the entire environment in the region.
So this is a shot looking kind of southwest at the South Capitol Street Bridge, and that is the former riverbed cutting through there on the right side, and the Corps of Engineers cut channel that it's officially called the Anacostia River. This is otherwise known as Kingman Lake, and you can see the circles of vegetation in there. We've been working for years to reestablish the wetland plants in there.
So this is something you've really been working on very continuously. Now, looking at this, is this the improved river that we're looking at?
Well, this is the Corps of Engineers' attempt to improve the river. They restored this wetland. They left that retaining wall out in front. It's temporary, but we're working to remove it. But again, that's part of the 130 acres of wetland that we have in there. What we want is that water to flow through there, kind of like a cool breeze blowing through my hair, Sam. We just want that water to go through there and touch all those plants and take out those nutrients and
then plant them right there.
Absolutely, and all the little habitat and such. So here you can see we've got access on that bridge to Kingman Island. That's a heritage island in closer, but you can just barely make out that there's a dock there. And one of the biggest problems we suffer from in the river is there's not good access. We've told people for 3 generations, don't go there, that river's dirty. And so they don't go there. And now what we really want to do is bring them back.
Trying to get them back. Okay, we're going to go out with this on. What do you see for the growth expansion as far as the work you're doing with the Anacostia River and with the AWS over the next 5, 10, or 15 years?
So again, my goal is Fishable and Swimmable by 2025. We could bring that in a little bit sooner, but we're on a great trajectory for that. We've got some real complicated work with legacy contaminated sediments in the river. We're all working together to make a sustainable solution for that happen. What I really want is for the river to be a destination. I want people to come back and spend time
now
on the
you
river.
want people to come back where you've been trying to warn them to stay away. This is Jim R. Foster. He's president and CEO of the Anacostia Watershed Society. It's always good to be with you.
Same.
Love the message that you have. And thank you, dear viewers, for seeing this as we're looking at the restoration of a major waterway in Washington, D.C. as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a crick in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. All of the ones get on. Very sad when all that I could do was remember you. You know I usually say no, but if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes. I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, yeah, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of EmeraldPlanet, EmeraldPlanet TV in Washington, D.C. We're looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for this 1,000 best practice, technologies, services, products, processes, and the people, of course, that are making a difference as we go through the 21st century. And as we move forward and we have a planet of about 9 billion people by 2050, how are we going to provide the food, the fuel, the fiber, all the basic infrastructure, but more than that, the water. And I have someone sitting right beside me who's concerns herself on a day-to-day basis. This is Ariel Trahan. She's a director of the River Restoration Programs. This is with the Anacostia Watershed Society in Washington, D.C. And Ariel, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I tell you, it's absolutely fantastic. I want to jump ahead to one of these photographs here because this is actually your work. This goes on Earth Day, and so you're really talking about how do you reclaim the Anacostia River, as we say, one volunteer at a time. So one, why do people want to volunteer? Because that's a lot of work. I've done that, and that is a tough day. And then why do we see all this mess actually in the Anacostia and the creeks and, you know, the little estuaries that feed into the Anacostia? Why do people do this?
Well, the Anacostia is a very urban river. It flows through Washington, D.C. and the surrounding communities, so we get a lot of the trash that ends up in the rivers washing in off of the streets and off of the parking lots and the sidewalks. So people aren't throwing the trash directly in the river. They might be walking down the sidewalk, or they might be waiting at the bus stop, and they might drop that chip bag or drop that water bottle on the ground and not think about the impact on the water. But of course, when it rains, it all gets washed down into the river. So because it is flowing through the city in an urban area, it's very visible to people. And so, you know, people want to help reclaim that waterway flowing through our cities. So I think it's really empowering for people to come out, clean up that trash. You can really see the difference that you're making in even a few hours. You can really see the improvement.
Well, you see the trash trucks back there, but you see all this. I think you're being very light and kind to the citizens, because when you look at this, you have wheels, you have tires. When we went out one day, we actually had an entire engine block. We had 2 refrigerators.
Yeah.
We had several grills. So why did these things, now we're getting down to the hard part of this, why do you think these things really end up in the river?
Yeah.
And what do we need to start doing to educate people to say, hey, we got to really protect this, because water is precious.
Right.
And most of the world is running out of it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely do see some of the larger things you're talking about where there is illegal dumping that exists, where people are dumping things into the creeks or into the river. But that's really changing, and a lot more of what we see in the river are these food convenience items. We do see, you know, even from when I first started working on the river about 9 years ago, you know, we see less of those larger items now, and we do see a lot more water bottles and soda bottles and chip bags. So I think it's a combination of, you know, the illegal dumping and then just the littering that gets washed in.
Yeah.
So.
And I know the one thing, the people just kind of smirked when City Council passed, you know, the nickel per bag. That's not going to do anything. Within the first year, 80% less plastic bags ended up in the Anacostia than the year before for 5 cents.
Right.
Now, I mean, that's a small price to pay, and you don't have to pay the 5 cents if you just keep taking, you know, whatever your bag is. Hopefully it's a recyclable, reusable bag.
Right.
And a lot of the trash you're picking up actually may go into, you know, replacing that and making the new bag. But looking at this, the before and after, I mean, this is profound when you look at what's in this image as far as all the water bottles, the plastic and all that, and then what the volunteers will do literally in a day.
Right, absolutely.
Now, how are they coached? How are they trained? How do they know what to do? And most of all, how to dress?
Yeah.
This is something you have to really be concerned with.
Absolutely. You're going to get muddy if you come out. So once people come out, we do our big Earth Day cleanup every year. And so when people come out, we do, of course, talk to them about safety. And then we also separate out the trash and the recycling so people can see the difference. People can really see, especially with the bottles, that's really impactful for people, as well as with straws. This year we focused on collecting straws separately as a way to raise awareness about something that is this single-use plastic item in our everyday lives, to try to make that point to people. The cleanup is all about, of course, getting the trash out of the river, but also hopefully impacting those people's behavior. Hopefully they're going to go back in their everyday life and think about, do I need a straw? Maybe could I use a reusable bottle? Try to reduce the amount of waste we're generating in the first place.
Now, having youth come out like this, I mean, these are teenagers, they look like, and they're out and they're picking up all this trash. And I know you're recruiting more and more youth to come out and be volunteers, on this Earth Day. What is that kind of impact is that having, not just on the Earth Day activities, but when they go back to their family and they start talking to the adults? The nasty stuff I had to pick up today. I mean, some of it's really nasty.
Absolutely, and we have a lot of parents who will then tell us, oh, since my kids came, now all they always talk about is how we have to recycle. So really reaching the kids is a great way to reach back into the community and get to the parents, get to the families. And, we're really trying to have this shift where people, if we get to the kids and we can reach them, that's something they're going to adopt in their life.
Now, some of these actually corporations, it's not only just nonprofits, communities of faith, but corporations are sending their people. Why are corporations backing this? Because people actually get leave time to do this, and they have to have volunteer hours.
Right.
As a social enterprise, and more institutions and corporations are becoming social enterprises.
Yeah.
What are they doing this for, and what is that long-term impact as far as the work that you're doing on this, the river restoration projects?
Yeah, so we have a lot of great corporate partners who come out and support us. Like you said, they'll send their employees to help clean up, and I think they really want to be good stewards of the environment as well. They're part of the community, they're part of the city and the fabric of our society, and so they want to contribute in a positive way.
Well, now we get to the straws. Okay. Now this has actually become a worldwide movement.
Yes.
No straw, just like I have a friend of mine who's the styrofoam mom.
Right.
No styrofoam to be used for anything.
Yeah.
And now there's a whole movement to do away with straws. And of course in the UK and other places in Europe, they've gone to paper straws.
Right.
And that's kind of the step to wean people from straws altogether. But looking at these straws, what is that doing to the water quality of the Anacostia? I know you're trying to increase the quality of the water there at all times.
Right.
This is not a good thing. So just removing straws, what kind of impact would that have just to fixing people's mind? It can be a little thing that will make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we really, the straws can be detrimental to water quality, of course, and they could impact animals. I think people have seen the picture of the turtle that has the straw in its nostril. And so it can definitely be an issue with water quality. And I think what we really hope with the straws is that it can be an example to help people change their behavior, thinking about what's one step that they can take and really think about, do I need to use this straw? Can I reduce the amount of waste that I'm using every day?
Okay, now we're getting down to the nitty gritty of this. We're looking at, we've got these clear plastic bags and we have the very dark, non-see-through plastic bags. What is this showing us? And then you talked about recycling as far as an important part of what you're doing. What is that impact? Not only on the Anacostia, but also long-term as far as what we're doing for the entire environment.
Absolutely. So when we collect the trash, when we do our cleanups, we want to separate out the trash from the recycling. So in the image you can see we have the bottles and the cans separated out. And so we
now, they are in which bags?
The clear bags are the bottles and cans.
That's what we want to get
to. Yeah.
Why the clear, why the dark?
Yeah, so the clear shows the bottles and cans because we like to use the data that we collect from the cleanups to help advocate for policy changes. So we would love to see something happen related to bottles because we do have so many bottles that end up in the river. So like you mentioned, we have the bag bill, we have the styrofoam bans. If we have this data to show how many bottles we have and that they really are a major contribution in terms of what's in the river, how can we use that data to have a policy?
Yeah, I was in just a few years ago, Trinidad, Tobago, and they were lamenting the fact that as the nation on Earth, they have more plastic bottles floating around in their country per capita than any other country on the planet. And so they were trying to figure out, what do we do with all this? So they have some small businesses that are actually going out now, hunting those things. So it seems like you're doing the very same thing here as far as taking this, and then this can be used, this post-consumer concept. Now, looking at the river itself, again, we have this sorting, but you have the creeks. I've done that. But actually on the Anacostia itself, how do people help there? How is that different than these smaller creeks that are feeding into the Anacostia River?
So when we do our Earth Day cleanup, we have cleanups throughout the watershed. So this year we had almost 40 different sites. So some on the tidal river itself, and then some on the tributaries, and some in neighborhoods as well. And so all of those places, we want people to see the trash that's in the river, get the trash out once it makes its way to the river, but also looking at the creeks, looking at the neighborhoods. If we can get the trash there first, then it's not going to make its way out into the river.
Yeah. Now, we're looking at all these, and these are different photographs, and these are very different people that we're seeing. So it's not the same group, being recycled through these photographs.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of people that volunteer.
We do.
So what is it that they are taking back to their homes, to their communities of faith, and to their workplace, wherever that may be? What is the message that they are getting from doing this? One, I'm tired and I'm sore after being out in all this mud. But secondly is the importance of what they're doing, and then how can they go back and sell it to people? Please don't do this.
Right.
Because we don't really want to keep going out and giving up, baseball time or going to the museums to clean up the river.
Yeah, we really want people, when they come out with us, to leave with a couple different messages. One, we want them to say, wow, what an amazing resource this river is. We do want to fight to protect this, do whatever we can to get it cleaned up. And then two, to think about, what can I do in my everyday life to have a positive impact on the river? Wow, I picked up over 500 bottles on Saturday morning. I'm going to go back and I'm not going to use bottled water anymore. I'm going to use a reusable bottle. Or I picked up so many straws. I'm not going to use a straw.
Well, and also, too, DC Water would say use the tap.
Right, absolutely.
Stop buying bottled water.
Right.
We're not against bottled water, but they would say use the tap,
Use the
because
tap water,
they have quality water, and this is something we should be using our own resource. We're going to go out on this. Looking at the people that are coming out, what is the mix of people that are coming out involved, as far as ages, different communities, schools, church communities? Just give us a mix of all of that.
Absolutely.
And how that really is impacting in a positive way what you're doing as far as your river restoration program.
Absolutely. We want to reach everybody that we can and get everybody engaged with the river. So like you said, we work with young kids. We have a lot of schools that come out. We work with church groups, youth groups, corporations, college students, people who live along the river and maybe have lived their whole life less than a mile from the river, but they've never been down to the river, as well as people from farther up in the watershed who haven't been down to the river.
What do you see for the expansion of your work over the next 5, 10, 15 years? So we got to be quick.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll just keep engaging more and more people and getting them to change their behavior so that we can have that positive impact.
Because I know year to year you have more and more people volunteering. This is great. This is Ariel Trahan. She is the Director of Water Restoration Programs and Anacostia Rivershed Program. And it's just really fantastic. This is just very refreshing to see all this, people getting out, taking pride in their community, really working hard as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things. 2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks. Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school. Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Welcome to the Emerald Planet, and what we're looking at as the planet goes to about 9 billion people by 2050 is how we're going to be able to take care of all these people. And of course, the whole notion is water is life, so we need to take care of water. And even though in Washington, D.C. and the Mid-Atlantic of the United States, we are really water rich, at the same time, what are we doing with our water and how are we protecting it to increase the quality of that and actually reduce the cost of as far as removing the chemicals and all the solid waste that ends up into our rivers. And I have someone sitting right beside me that's actually doing more of that. This is Ariel Trahan. She is the director of the river restoration programs of the Anacostia Watershed Society. Glad to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
And the interesting thing about this, and one of your colleagues reminded me as far as the various land and the type of soils and vegetation around these rivers, these are almost like lungs. And so they're breathing for the river. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, they're filtering, so they're like kidneys.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, they have multi-functions. So looking at the work that you're doing as far as, the watersheds, protecting them and all that,
Mm-hmm.
what are forest ecology?
Mm-hmm.
And then invasive species, what are they? Because everybody thinks boxwoods is native to
Right.
Virginia, Washington, D.C., Southern Maryland. It's not.
Right.
It's really an invasive species.
Right.
And so, and then why should we be concerned about all this?
So forest ecology, when we're talking about ecology, that's the branch of biology where we're looking at the interactions between organisms and the environment. So forest ecology is really looking at all the different organisms in the forest and how do they intersect with the soil and with the, all the living and non-living things in the forest. And in terms of invasive species, that's something that shouldn't be there. A species that was introduced in some way, unintentionally usually, that can upset the balance in that ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how does that negatively impact the Anacostia River? My understanding, the Anacostia River at 1607, when the colonists first came up, had a draft of about 30 feet.
Yeah.
Now suppose it's a draft of about 2 feet.
Right.
Maybe a little bit more than
more,
that.
yeah, right.
But, you get the idea that
Right.
we had a whole lot, now almost nothing. So how has all of this really impacted the Anacostia in a very negative way? And how what we're looking at, what these youth are doing, learning about different plants and
Right.
the greening of the area around the Anacostia River really has long-term impact.
Absolutely. So there are lots of different invasive species. Unfortunately, we have lots of different ones that have impacted the Anacostia watershed. So, for example, one that we have is Phragmites, which is an invasive wetland plant. And so it gets into the wetlands and it starts growing very aggressively and doesn't have any predators in this ecosystem. And so the roots almost create a blanket over the soil so nothing else can grow. The native plants that, like you said, are helping to filter the water, they're unable to grow because the invasive species are kind of taking up all the nutrients and choking everything out. Another invasive species that we have is the emerald ash borer, and so that is an insect that has killed a lot of the ash trees, and so that has caused a lot of detriment specifically in our forests because it's gotten into the trees, burrows into the trees, and then it kills off all the ash trees, so really impacts the forest canopy.
Now looking at, I know you're working very closely with schools and communities of faith. Why is it so important to focus on the youth? Because a lot of your work really is focused on the youth, and then what you're doing is that you're backing up to the adults, within the households of these youth, and maybe multi-generational. Many of them are being raised by their grandparents or aunts and uncles. So how are getting the youth to understand what's going on really impacting as far as the adults?
Yeah, so we do a lot of environmental education work. So we work with students and adults, like you said. We work with a lot of students in our school-based programs where we go into their classroom and work with them and teach them about the river, teach them about the ecosystem. We bring them out on the river so they can see the river firsthand.
As we see in this photograph, right? This is an incredible photograph. Everybody in their waders.
Absolutely, yeah, and then we get them out there so they can take part in an action project, so they can get their hands dirty and take part in the restoration, because we really want to have a shift that happens where if we really want to have sustainable change, we really need people to think about how does what they do in their everyday life impact the environment. And so bringing the kids out, showing them the river, showing them the impact that they're having, and then getting them involved in an action project is really the way we hope to achieve that.
And the whole thing about going to the youth, as the parents will see what the youth are doing or the adults in the household, usually if the youth are doing it, they'll become involved.
Right.
If you're just asking them to do it, to give up a Saturday or come out in the evening to learn about, the river or whatever, oh, I'm busy and all that. But if the youth are going to do it, usually they're going to show up. Absolutely. So what are you finding as far as the participation rates in the households where you're reaching them through the schools, communities of faith, where you're not being able to get into those schools or communities of faith? What's the difference?
Well, we've really had a lot of success into getting into the schools. We've been working to not only work with individual schools, but working on the curriculum side as well. So getting a lot of environmental education work embedded in the curriculum.
Just like this photograph we're looking at right here, people learning how to plant things.
Absolutely, yeah, getting them actively engaged in the restoration. You can tell people that plants are important, but it's much different to bring them out there and have them actually plant something.
Right.
We have another program that some of the plants that we just saw where the students are growing the wetland plants in their classroom for about 6 weeks and then bringing them out to transplant them in the river. So we really increase their investment because they've grown that plant in their class, they've seen it every day, they've watched it grow, and then they get to bring it out to the river.
So what's it, just like this young boy here getting ready to get onto the boat, what are those young eyes seeing that they would in most cases never see?
Absolutely.
And they're living right here, surrounded by, the rivers and the estuaries and the forests. I mean, this is a very green city. It's almost getting up to 40% now under canopy in Washington, D.C. itself. But yet, when they have their hands on this, there's a change.
Absolutely.
What is that change?
Well, there's a change because they're actively invested in it. So they're getting a chance to get out there, get their hands dirty. They're not just, seeing a picture of a plant. They've grown it, they've planted it, they've made sure that it's secure in the mud and it's ready to start growing and filtering. And it really just gives them a different perspective on the city where they live too, because they're out there on the river and they might be going under a bridge, they might be going under New York Avenue. They've driven over that bridge before, but they maybe never noticed the river underneath there. And now they're going under it on a boat and they're seeing a bald eagle fly by and they're seeing the turtles. So they're thinking about the city as not just the home of all these people, but what wildlife is living here too.
Yeah, and this canoe trip out on the estuary, I remember through 4-H we used to do this in the summer and get out in a canoe and all that. And it really changes your interaction as far as the river concerned when you're right there. You're paddling in the canoe and the water is, probably 6 or 8 inches below you.
Yeah.
Am I going to end up in that?
Right.
So what is this actually teaching them as far as what kind of skills are they gaining through this that they would never get sitting in the classroom or just living around the water but not actually interacting with it as we're seeing here?
Yeah, and well, it's such a great opportunity to get them out there and do real inquiry-based learning where they're out there and they're asking questions.
Sell out again, because this is something you went over very quickly. What type of based learning?
Inquiry-based.
Okay.
Inquiry-based learning.
Now, what does that mean?
That's where the students are asking questions. We're not just telling them information, but they're out there and they're making observations and they're coming up with authentic questions on their own that they're asking based on what they see. Why are there plants on that side? Why aren't there plants over here? How could we have more plants? Why don't we have more plants? So getting them to really think actively about what the solutions could be.
And it's just like we're seeing right here, this interaction among the kids themselves is what's going on. How does these green lands we're looking at right here become the lungs, the kidneys, the heart everything as far as the Anacostia River. And then as this water flows through and it goes into the Chesapeake Bay and then it ends up into the Atlantic Ocean, it all starts in Greenlands, just like we're looking at right here.
It does.
What's that process and how is that changing the water before it ever gets to the Chesapeake Bay or out to the Atlantic?
Yeah, so here we're looking at some wild rice, which used to be one of the main plants that we had along the Anacostia. We used to have 2,500 acres of freshwater tidal wetlands. Now we have just over 100 acres. And so those wetlands, they help to filter the water. They act as that natural filter, that buffer along the water. So they're filtering the water, they're providing food and habitat for all the wildlife. They can help prevent against flood control. Just basically like having a sponge along the river that can help to absorb that water, where if you think about the urban landscape, we've really made it more like a funnel where all the water just runs off into the river. We really need to make it back into something more like a sponge where that water can soak in, and especially where we have the wetlands and these native plants, they can help filter out a lot of that pollution so the water is clean.
And I'm purposely leaving this photograph here a little longer than normal because, you know, we're talking about we're going to add 2 billion. That's a B. 2 billion new people to the planet before 2050. And we're going back to a lot of these original species. In other words, like this rice that we're talking about right here. How does that help us to move forward to the future? One, to protect the environment, to improve the environment, and secondly, to be able to feed all these new people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, increasing the amount of green space that we have and these plants that are able to absorb water, where you see we have them along the river, but we also have them in the urban areas. So things where we have rain gardens and bioretentions that have these native plants because they are so good at absorbing that water. And yeah, once we get the water cleaned up someday, maybe we'll be able to eat that rice too.
Yeah, yeah. And that's something that's very important. And even, you know, grow beds and all those kinds of things. Instead of just playing directly into soil, it's been absorbing carbons for 125 years or more. We want to make sure that it's good to be able to grow that. Now here's teachers and students out on the river. What is the teacher actually learning from this experience? We understand what the kids are learning in most cases, but what is the teacher getting out of this?
Yeah, a lot of times the teachers are learning as much as the kids are. The kids, you know, at the beginning of a trip, we ask, okay, who's been on a boat before? Most times not too many people raise their hand, right? So it's a new experience for the students and the teachers. So we're really increasing the environmental literacy of the students, getting them to learn about their environment, but the teachers as well. And then they can go back to the classroom and make those connections for the students.
Just like what we're seeing right here and all this. This is a beautiful photograph. We're going to go out on this. What do you see as far as expanding the forest ecology, removing invasive species, and really involving the community and the work that you're doing through the Anacostia Watershed Association and Society?
We want to keep restoring our natural systems so that we have that landscape more like a sponge, so it's able to absorb that water, and really engaging the community and helping us do that.
Yeah, and having the community actually there to be partners in what's going on. That's fantastic. This is Ariel Trahan. She's a director of the river restoration programs. Very impressive, the work that you're doing, Anacostia Watershed Society.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here to talk about all this, because what you're doing is critical not only to the Anacostia and right here, but actually all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. We kind of forget that we really are feeding the Atlantic Ocean as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. Never know what to get on. Stay now. you throw me love off with some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes. I
Right?
mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, yeah, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
We're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of EmeraldPlanet, EmeraldPlanet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis looking at 144 different nations, looking for what we're calling the 1,000 best practices, the best of the best. And we're always looking for solutions, and that's what we're focused on as far as this particular program. We have James, he goes by Jim R. Foster. He's the president and CEO of the Anacostia Watershed Society. And we're talking about a new program. It's called Mussels. Now, I know you're a muscular guy and you're doing all kinds of good things out there, but I think we're talking about a different type of mussels and all this. And so looking at that, and I want to go to this. This is something you've had hundreds of volunteers, actually probably thousands of volunteers by now, almost 3 decades. And what is it about the Anacostia River that really invokes the community being so intensely involved in what it is you're doing? I mean, you're a fairly small organization, but you're doing great work, but you go way beyond, you know, your actual size because of the volunteers. How do you recruit people to come into the organization the way that you do?
Sam, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. It's basically, we really work to facilitate a positive experience and an educational experience. And so the companies come or the students come, we're prepared for them. There's interaction between staff and them. For instance, on our Thursday night Discovery series, we've got people giving them a little safety briefing. They get discussion about the river. There's people out on the river to help them. For our other Watershed Wednesday evenings, we're out. We usually have a little bit of a lecture. So, you know, at the cleanups as well, we talk about why this is important, why we're finding it. We've talked about straws. And the straws, we're not going to clean up the whole world by cleaning up the straws, but it's really about behavior change and getting people, because it's in their face, getting them to respond and change their behavior.
So really what you're doing is you're helping people to understand why interacting with the river, the Anacostia, and of course nature all around them is so important for them as, you know, individuals, as a family, also as a community. And it's education, education, education.
It is. It's really showing people that this natural environment is part of can be part of their everyday life and what they do. We put a water trail out on the river, so you could come down in lunchtime and paddle, you know, for an hour up the river and get out someplace else and see something.
Well, the reason I was going over these dedicated volunteers, you've had thousands of those, but actually you're enlisting millions of volunteers, and we're looking at one of them right here. Tell us what we're actually looking at, and how do you have this one mussel, and all of a sudden we're talking about millions? Yeah. What's happening?
Sam, the Anacostia is, we're about 200 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. There's no salinity in the water there, so we can't support oysters and such. But we can support freshwater mussels. And we've been finding 8 different species of those mussels in the river as the water quality has improved over the last few years. And we recognize that mussels are a filtering organism that will remove a lot of sediment from the water and help improve water clarity. And they also are very basic to the food chain for some of the animals that we see in the river. So we have decided to help propagate those mussels and help them be more have more of them in the river. So this X297 here was a mussel that we took from the river and took it to a hatchery, and this mussel gave us, with a couple others, gave us about 35,000 babies.
35,000. That's
from
just
one,
an incredible number.
Right. So we are hoping that, and we have those back now. They're about the size of a dime. They've been growing for really only 2 or 3 months. But we expect to see great things. We are going to put them in very public places, hang them in baskets at docks and such with a little bit of signage. Because our first step, again, is to get people understanding what we're trying to accomplish and why. So people go, why mussels?
Yeah, and the whole thing about Samantha from Reston was calling in asking about the mussels, and we had the scenes there of these huge machines that are going in. You got this $2.7 billion invested in all these tunnels and all that. Now we're talking about mussels and something that's very natural. So you have this huge technology out there that's working on restoring the Anacostia River. But now you're going into the natural way. How do these two complement each other, and why is both equally as important as the other?
The Anacostia is an urban river. It's a very small watershed, 176 square miles, or maybe 380, I don't know how many hectares that is, but we have a higher density than most other rivers. And so we are going to need to apply some technology and fix some of the human-induced issues through the use of human-induced solutions. But ultimately, we really need the natural systems. We need to reconnect the hydrologic cycle in the Anacostia, and mussels are foundational to helping do that.
Yeah. Now you're saying that we've actually identified these 8 different species in the river now that we can actually see them, even though they've been there and they survived through all this industrial damage that we've done for almost 400 years, that the Europeans have been here. Right. So did we not know they were there and they're being rediscovered now? Or is the fact is that we knew they were there, we just couldn't find them? Or what was the story of these mussels, and why, do you have such national attention? I mean, this is news all over the world about finding these mussels, and now you're getting large-scale organizations saying, we want to help do this.
So mussels are a great indicator that the water is getting cleaner. And from that perspective, we probably had some mussels there. We just weren't even aware of it, frankly. But we're also seeing them come back from a cleaner Potomac River. And as they do get, as the water does clear up, we hope to see more of them. We're not seeing as many upstream yet because the water clarity isn't as good as it is downstream, but they will help. So between the submerged aquatic vegetation and the mussels, it's almost a perpetual motion machine where one helps the other clean up the water.
Well, look at all these children here that are involved in what this process is all about. Where do children, adults, and mussels meet, and what's the importance of that as far as the Anacostia River? Absolutely. Of having all of this, as you're saying, these moving parts working together?
We are working to engage thousands of kids. If you want to change the world, you have to work with the kids. And mussels are a fabulous way to do that. We're working to do that in the classrooms. We'll be having kids grow the mussels in a 3-part program there where they are taking care of them in the classroom. They're learning about meaningful watershed education experiences through that, and then actually coming out, planting them, and taking ownership of them. Some of those kids we hope will come back as college interns and do some research on that, and then hopefully come back when they work for a big company and help sponsor and take care of that.
Now, the whole thing about it, going back to the youth that we have here, this is a way that you're getting involved, and I know you're actually incorporating the arts in all of this. Now, these, it doesn't look like much, but these are actually manhole covers that you're now having as far as artwork. Now we have the intersect of the mussels, the kids, the adults. Now we have art involved. So how does all of this shape and focus on what we're looking at as far as the river is concerned, but also the constant improvement of the Anacostia River?
So a lot of this is how do we make this the new normal? And these are storm drains that are out in the community, and we've given kids an opportunity working with an artist who lays it out. The kids paint it, but it's in their community and they can walk by it every day and see it. But they also learn that that storm drain is attached to the river, and anything that goes down the storm drain ends up in the river. They've been out on the river to see it. One of my corporate sponsors came out one time and kept back, and the guy's shaking his head. I go, "What's wrong?" He goes, "That's all my product out there in the river." And that's how things change. That's how things get better. And we want to get to the kids early on to show them that.
Yeah, now looking at this is really very attractive, so we'll stop on this one for a little while. As far as what is going into the river, what's that direct connection from, this, water main going out to the river, and how is that impacting in a very negative way the Anacostia, or how taking care of this could impact in a very positive way? So it's a two-way flow here.
What we have found in so many communities is that they have this very little information about what this infrastructure is. And so as we've adopted this lifestyle of convenience where you can buy a bag of potato chips and a soda on every corner, walk along, eat it, they go, "Where should we put it?" And typically they've been just putting it into the storm drain, and in their naive understanding, that goes to the water treatment plant. Well, it does in part of Washington, D.C. It goes into the combined sewer, but in many other places it does not. And so we're really working to connect those people from where they are, at where they are, with their waterways, their local waterways. Cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay is such a big concept. People don't get it, but cleaning up their local streams, they get it.
And also having this artwork as far as this manhole cover here and all that. I mean, this is something people, as you say, walk by every day, and they start to understand how all this fits together. Sure. So when you're looking at the future, and we're almost at the end of this, how do we take this beauty that we have here and protect the monarch butterfly, which I'm part of? That's one of my things that we take care of. But the rivers, the natural surroundings, how do we do that so that it's fun, it's light, but at the same time it's very serious, and we incorporate this into our day-to-day life?
We can't just look at our world as being all about gross domestic product. We have to look at sustainability. What's it going to be like in 10, 20, 50 years? And we need to measure that. We need to understand, is what we're doing here sustainable? 100 years ago, they were taking 4 million pounds of shad from the river, completely unsustainable. And today, the shad population had crashed, and that's why we're working to restore it. But we really need to understand how incredibly interconnected and woven together the fabric of our environment really is.
We're going to go out on this picture right here. This is, a drain that's coming off. How, if we protect this one thing, how is that helping to protect the entire river, the Chesapeake Bay, and the Atlantic Ocean? How is all this connected?
Everything that happens on the land ends up in the water. And so we really need to understand that connection and know that whether it's trash, nutrients, sediment, organic chemicals from vehicle exhaust, it's all going to end up in the river. And that's the point where it happens, right there.
We're going to leave this right up here.
Thank you,
Jim
brother.
Foster, thank you for being here. He's the president and CEO of the Anacostia Watershed Society. Thank you to your viewers for being with us. We're leaving you with this image as we create the Emerald Planet.